The war was finally over. After years of destruction, countless lives lost, and untold suffering, the people of the galaxy could finally breathe. The Zorth Empire, once an unstoppable force, had been defeated. The human colonies, who had been fighting for their survival, stood victorious. But the victory came at a price. The galaxy was broken. Its once vibrant civilizations now left to rebuild from the ashes of war. Princess Lyra stood in the grand hall of the Zorth capital, staring out of the large window. The view was breathtaking, yet it felt empty to her. The city, once full of life and vibrancy, now stood in silence. Buildings were crumbled or left abandoned. The noise of the celebrations outside, marking the victory of the humans over her own people, seemed distant. As if the celebrations could never reach her. Her people had lost the war, and now she had to lead them out of the darkness. She was no longer just a princess, a figurehead with royal duties. With her mother, the Empress, dead in the final battle, Lyra had inherited the throne. But she was too young, in many ways, and unprepared for the weight of the crown she now wore. Despite the crushing weight of responsibility, something else gnawed at her heart. There was a question she couldn't ignore, a mystery that lingered in the back of her mind since the final battle. The mysterious warrior, known only by the call sign Spectre, had been the key to the humans' victory. No one knew the true identity of this warrior. They had appeared suddenly during the final assault on the Zorth fleet, turning the tide of the war in an instant. No one could match their skill. Spectre was a legend in the making. The warrior's stealth, precision, and speed had left even the Zorth military commanders in awe. It was said that Spectre fought with the precision of a machine but the heart of a hero. Everyone assumed that Spectre was simply another human soldier, perhaps a special forces operative, or an unknown hero who had risen during the war. But there was something about Spectre's fighting style that caught Lyra's attention. It reminded her of someone she had once known, someone she had grown up with, a boy named Alex. Lyra's childhood had been different from most of her peers. As a member of the royal family, she had been protected and shielded from the harsh realities of the galaxy. However, when she was younger, her father, the Emperor, had insisted that she spend some time with the human colonies. The idea had been to teach her empathy, to help her understand the different races in the galaxy. That was when she had met Alex. Alex had been her best friend during those early years, someone who had been there for her when the weight of her royal status felt too heavy to bear. They had spent hours together, exploring the palace gardens, talking about their hopes and dreams, and simply enjoying each other's company. Even though they came from vastly different worlds, their bond had been strong. Alex had been an ordinary boy, but to Lyra, he had been extraordinary. He had been brave, kind, and clever, with a determination that seemed beyond his years. And despite their differences, they had promised each other that no matter where life took them, they would always be there for one another. But the war had torn them apart. When the conflict had begun, Lyra had lost touch with Alex. She had heard rumors of human soldiers fighting across the galaxy, but the thought of him being out there, somewhere in the war, had haunted her. She had tried to reach him, but the war had made communication nearly impossible. As the years passed, the memory of her childhood friend faded into the background of her royal duties and the war's brutality. Yet now, as she stood on the balcony, watching the celebrations, a part of her could not shake the feeling that Spectre was somehow linked to him. The war had ended with Spectre's final strike, but the mystery remained. Who was Spectre? Was it possible that this legendary warrior was Alex? Lyra's thoughts were interrupted as a soft voice echoed from behind her. "Your Highness, the peace talks are about to begin. The human representatives are waiting for you." Lyra turned to face her personal aide, who had appeared in the doorway, bowing respectfully. "Thank you," Lyra replied, her voice steady but distant. She straightened her posture, placing the weight of the galaxy's future back onto her shoulders. She had to push these thoughts of Spectre aside. There were more important matters to attend to: peace talks with the humans, the rebuilding of her empire, and the restoration of her people's dignity. As she made her way down the corridor toward the conference room, her mind couldn't help but drift back to the mysterious warrior. What if it was Alex? What if the boy she had once known had returned as this unstoppable force, fighting for a side he had never believed in? Was he the one who had brought the war to its end, or was he simply a tool of the humans? Either way, it didn't matter. The war was over, and now they all had to live with the consequences. The Peace Summit was being held on neutral ground and ancient space station built long before the war. The station, now in ruins, was meant to symbolize unity and hope for the future. As Lyra entered the grand meeting hall, her eyes scanned the room filled with representatives from the human colonies. There was an air of tense optimism in the room, hope for the future, but a deep awareness of the fragility of peace. Even the humans were not certain that the war would stay over. As the human representatives began to speak, Lyra couldn't concentrate. Her mind kept drifting back to Spectre. She tried to listen to the speeches, to the discussions of trade, of borders, of diplomacy. But all she could hear was the soft thudding of her heartbeat. The more she thought about it, the more certain she became. Spectre wasn't just some random soldier. There was something about them, something familiar. And that something, she was starting to believe, was Alex. Princess Lyra, a voice interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to see one of the human delegates standing before her, a man with short, graying hair and a stern expression. Princess, I know this is a difficult time for you, but we must move forward. The peace depends on our cooperation. Lyra nodded, her attention now fully on the man before her. She offered a polite smile, even though her heart was still racing. I understand, she said softly. I'm ready to do whatever it takes to ensure that peace endures, for the sake of both our peoples, and yet, deep down, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more important waiting for her, something tied to the past. She didn't know when or how, but she had to find out who Spectre truly was. And when she did, she would have to face the truth no matter how painful it might be. The peace talks were tense. Princess Lyra sat at the long table, her hands folded neatly in front of her. But her thoughts were far from the discussions unfolding in front of her. The room was filled with representatives from the human colonies, as well as advisors and ambassadors from the Zorth Empire. There were offers of trade, promises of rebuilding, and even tentative agreements on how to ensure that the war's devastation would not repeat itself. But Lyra could barely focus on the words every now and then. Her eyes would drift to the empty chair at the far end of the table. It was supposed to be the seat of Spectre, the mysterious warrior who had helped bring the war to an end. But the warrior had not appeared at the summit. Instead, the humans sent their diplomats, while Spectre's identity remained hidden. Lyra tried to ignore the growing feeling inside her. It was a sense of unease that she couldn't shake. She had spent days trying to suppress it, but it was impossible now. The more she heard about Spectre, the more convinced she became that the warrior was someone she knew, a person from her past. Alex. Her memories of Alex, her childhood friend, flooded back. The hours they spent together in the gardens of the royal palace, the games they played, the promises they made to each other. These memories had been pushed aside over the years, as the war consumed everything. But now, they felt fresh, as though they had never left her. Could it really be him? Could Spectre really be Alex? The thought was too much to bear. She needed to know. She needed answers. But how could she find them in the midst of all this? How could she go on, leading her people, when her mind kept returning to that one question? The sound of a door opening startled her out of her thoughts. She looked up just as one of her advisors entered the room, looking flustered. Your Highness, the advisor said, bowing quickly. There's been a security breach. The human delegation is under attack. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. The humans? She had hoped the peace would last, but she should have known better. The war had left deep scars on both sides, and not everyone was ready to accept the end. There were still those who believed that the conflict was far from over. Where? Lyra demanded, standing up from her seat near the eastern wing of the station. The advisor replied, We've received reports of armed insurgents trying to sabotage the talks. They're human rebels, Your Highness. Rebels? Lyra's voice hardened. The idea that people human or Zorth were willing to undo everything they had fought for was infuriating. We cannot let this stand. Gather the guards. We will stop them, She turned quickly, her cape sweeping behind her as she strode toward the door. But before she could leave, the advisor hesitated. "There's more, Your Highness," the advisor added, glancing nervously at the door. "One of our intelligence officers reports that Spectre has been spotted in the area." At the mention of the name, Lyra froze. "Spectre? Here? Now, what do you mean, spotted?" she asked, her voice cold and steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. "Is the warrior assisting the rebels?" "No, Your Highness," the advisor quickly explained. "It appears Spectre is working to stop the insurgents." Lyra's heart pounded. She didn't know what to feel: anger, relief, confusion. But one thing was certain. She had to see this for herself. She couldn't remain here, unable to act. While the mystery of Spectre remained unsolved, without another word, she marched out of the room, her guards falling into line behind her. The eastern wing of the space station was in chaos. Lyra could hear the sounds of distant gunfire and the crackling of weapons being fired in the distance. As she rounded the corner, she saw a group of soldiers, human and Zortha-like, fighting to subdue a small band of rebels. The rebels, armed with blasters and grenades, fought fiercely, but they were outnumbered and outmatched by the combined forces of the humans and the Zorth. Then, a flash of movement caught her eye. Lyra's breath caught in her throat as a figure appeared from the shadows. The warrior moved with fluid precision, effortlessly dodging blasts and taking down rebels one by one. They were fast, impossibly fast, and they seemed to anticipate every move before it happened. The way the warrior fought, it was so familiar. The same grace, the same style, the same calm focus. It couldn't be anyone else. The warrior was wearing a full set of black combat armor, their face hidden behind a dark mask. But even so, there was something about the way they moved, something unmistakable. Lyra's heart raced. It had to be Alex. It was the only explanation that made sense. Without thinking, she stepped forward, her voice rising above the noise of the battle. "Stop," she shouted. The figure paused mid-movement, their head turning toward her. The mask hid their expression, but the way they stood, the stillness in their posture, told her everything she needed to know. This was no ordinary soldier. This was someone she had known. Lyra's voice wavered as she spoke again, more softly this time. "Alex." The figure didn't move for a long moment. Then, slowly, they began to lower their weapon, their stance relaxing. The other soldiers, realizing the fight was over, stopped firing and looked to Lyra for guidance. The warrior removed their mask. In the moment Lyra saw the face beneath, her breath caught in her chest. "Lyra," Alex said quietly, his voice rough from years of fighting, yet still carrying the warmth she remembered. "It's been a long time." Lyra felt a rush of emotions. Relief, disbelief, joy, and sadness all hit her at once. Alex, her childhood friend, her companion, was standing in front of her. But this wasn't the same Alex she had once known. The years of war had changed him. His eyes, once filled with youthful optimism, now carried the weight of countless battles fought and lives lost. "You're Spectre," Lyra said, her voice trembling. Alex nodded, his expression a mix of regret and sorrow. "I had to fight, Lyra. I had no choice. I never wanted this. But I couldn't just sit by while the war raged on." Lyra took a step forward, her eyes searching his. "I thought you were lost. I thought I'd never see you again." "I know," Alex replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry, Lyra. I should have been there. I should have, but you're here now," she interrupted, her heart racing. "You're here, and we can figure this out. We can make things right." For the first time in years, Lyra felt a spark of hope. The war was over, and now, for the first time in what seemed like forever, the future felt possible. Together, they could build something new, something better. But first, they would have to face the past and the painful truth of everything they had both lost. Lyra stared at Alex, still unsure whether what she was seeing was real. The man before her had once been the boy she had shared countless memories with, the boy who had made promises to her, the boy who had been her best friend. But now, Alex was no longer the carefree child she remembered. He was hardened, scarred by the years of war. His eyes, once filled with warmth and hope, were now a mirror of the suffering he had endured. Yet, despite all the changes, something in his gaze remained familiar. "I can't believe it's really you," Lyra whispered, still in shock. The world around her seemed to pause, and for a moment, it was just the two of them standing in the midst of the chaos. "Alex, where have you been? What happened?" Alex's expression softened, but there was a deep sadness in his eyes. He took a deep breath, as if gathering his thoughts, and began speaking in a quiet voice. "I never wanted to be here, Lyra," he said, looking down at the ground. "The war, it pulled me in. After you and I lost contact, I couldn't just sit back. I joined the resistance, hoping to make a difference, to fight for something bigger than myself. But as the years passed, I became more than just a soldier. I became Spectre, a symbol. I didn't have a choice." Lyra felt her chest tighten. The man standing before her wasn't just Alex anymore. He was the hero of the human colonies, the warrior who had brought an end to the war. She had never imagined he would become a symbol of everything the humans had fought for. But despite the stories of Spectre's heroics, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "You were my best friend," Lyra said softly, her voice trembling. "I thought I had lost you, and now you're a hero to the humans, and I'm the ruler of a broken empire. We're on opposite sides, Alex. How did this happen?" Alex looked up at her, his eyes filled with regret. "I never wanted to be your enemy, Lyra. But the war changed everything. We fought for survival, both sides believing they were right. In the end, I had to do what I thought was best for my people. And you had to do what you thought was best for yours." Lyra shook her head, feeling a weight in her chest. "I never wanted any of this. I didn't want the war. I didn't want to be a ruler, and I certainly didn't want to lose you. You were the one person I could trust, the one person who made me feel human, in a way." She paused, looking away as the old feelings resurfaced, memories of simpler times. "And now, after everything, I'm not sure if I can trust anything anymore." Alex reached out slowly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I never stopped caring about you, Lyra. I never stopped hoping that one day we would find a way back to each other. But I was just one soldier in a war that was bigger than both of us. I didn't expect to survive, let alone be standing here now." His voice faltered as he spoke, and Lyra could see how much he had been through. It wasn't just the physical scars, but the emotional ones too. The weight of the years, the countless battles. The people he had lost, it had all left its mark on him. "I don't know how to fix this," Lyra whispered, the tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "Everything is broken. My people have lost their way. The empire is in ruins, and now we're supposed to rebuild it with the very people we fought against. How do we even begin?" Alex looked at her with a mixture of sympathy and determination. "We start by being honest with each other. We face the truth of what we've both been through, and we help our people heal. It won't be easy, but it's the only way." Lyra swallowed hard, trying to steady her emotions. "But how can I trust you, Alex? How can I trust anything? You were the enemy. You fought against my people, against everything I stood for. I didn't want to be your enemy," Alex said again, his voice earnest. "But I had no choice. I fought because I believed in something. I believed that the humans deserved to be free, that they deserved a future of their own, just like your people deserve the same. We both had reasons, but in the end, it's not about who won the war. It's about what comes after." Lyra looked at him, her heart torn between the feelings of betrayal and the warmth she still felt toward him. She had spent so many years believing that Alex was lost, that she would never see him again. And now that he was here, alive, she didn't know how to reconcile the past with the present. "I don't know if I can leave my people," Lyra admitted, her voice quiet. "I don't know if I'm strong enough. My mother ruled with an iron fist, and now I have to take her place, with everything falling apart. I don't know what I'm supposed to do." Alex's face softened as he looked at her. "You don't have to do it alone, Lyra. You never did. You have your people, your allies, and you have me. I may not have been by your side all these years, but I'm here now. I'll help you in whatever way I can." She felt a flicker of hope at his words, but it was fleeting. The reality of the situation was still too much to bear. Lyra was a princess, a ruler, and yet she felt so lost. She had never asked for this responsibility. She had never asked for the war. But here she was, standing in the ruins of her empire, with the weight of her people's future resting on her shoulders. "I don't know if I can rebuild everything that's been broken," Lyra said softly. "But maybe, with your help, I can try." Alex nodded, his gaze filled with understanding. "We'll rebuild, Lyra, together." For a moment, there was silence between them. The echoes of the past and the weight of the present hung in the air. But for the first time in a long time, Lyra felt a small spark of hope. The road ahead would be difficult, and there were many obstacles to overcome. But she no longer felt like she had to face it alone. Alex was here, and though they were both changed by the war, their bond from the past had not been entirely erased. Lyra took a deep breath and looked at him. Her voice steady now. "We have a lot to do. There's still a long way to go, but maybe this is the beginning of something new. Maybe it's time for both our people to move forward." Alex gave a small smile, a glimmer of the boy she once knew returning in his eyes. "I think you're right, Lyra. Let's start by figuring out how to make this peace real. Not just for us, but for everyone." And with that, Lyra knew that the journey ahead would not be easy. But with Alex by her side, there was a chance, just a small chance, that they could find a way to bring their people together and build a future where they could both live in peace. The space station was in ruins. It had been meant to symbolize peace, but now it was a battleground once again. Lyra and Alex stood side by side, their backs pressed against the cold walls of a corridor, their weapons ready as the distant sounds of chaos echoed through the station. The peace talks had collapsed. Once again, the threat of war loomed over them, as rogue factions, both human and Zorth, had decided that peace was not what they wanted. These factions were determined to undo everything to bring back the old ways of conflict. It was as if the war had never ended. Lyra felt a cold knot in her stomach. How had things gotten so bad? She had hoped that the end of the war would bring them closer to a peaceful future, but instead, they were surrounded by enemies both new and old, trying to tear it all down. The fragility of peace was painfully clear to her now. Beside her, Alex moved with the same precision and calm that she had remembered from their time together as children. He had grown into a man shaped by war, but his presence was a comfort to her. He had been her strength when they were younger, and now, in this moment of crisis, he was once again there for her. "What do we do now?" Lyra asked, her voice steady, though the weight of the situation bore down on her. Alex's eyes flicked over to her, and she saw the intensity in them. He was thinking quickly, analyzing the situation, and Lyra knew that he was trying to keep their emotions in check for the sake of their mission. "We need to secure the main control room," Alex said. "If we can get to the communication systems, we can send a message to both sides and put a stop to this madness." Lyra nodded, swallowing hard. "I never wanted to be in charge of this. I never wanted to have to make these decisions. I want peace. I want to save my people." Alex stepped closer, his expression softening. "You don't have to do it alone, Lyra. I'm here. We're in this together. You're not just a ruler, you're a leader, and your people need you. I need you." His words struck her deeply. She had never truly allowed herself to rely on anyone before. The weight of leadership had always been hers to carry, but now, standing here with Alex, she realized that maybe she didn't have to shoulder it alone. Before she could respond, an explosion rocked the station. The lights flickered, and the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. Lyra's heart raced. This was it. The battle had come to them. "Get ready," Alex said, his voice low, and he gestured for Lyra to follow him. They moved quickly, silently, ducking behind corners and using the shadows to stay out of sight. Lyra could feel the tension building in the air, the fear that had once been so familiar creeping back into her chest. She had fought in battles before, but never like this, not against people who were supposed to be allies, not against rebels within her own ranks, not against those who believed that peace was not worth the fight. They reached the control room after what felt like hours. The station had once been a beacon of hope, But now it was a symbol of everything that was wrong with the galaxy. Lyra could see the shattered windows, the scorch marks on the walls, and the broken security systems. The station was falling apart. Inside the control room, a group of rebels was waiting. They were humans, angry and disillusioned by the peace that had been forced upon them. They didn't care about the future. They only cared about the past, about revenge, and about restoring the old ways of war. Lyra could see the leader of the group tall, dark-haired, with a scar across his cheek. He was the one who had orchestrated the attack on the summit. You should have stayed out of this. Princess, the rebel leader sneered, his voice filled with disdain. You think peace is possible? You think you can fix the galaxy with some simple agreement? You're just like your mother. You're weak. Lyra's heart burned with anger. She could feel the weight of her mother's legacy pushing down on her, the expectations, the duty. But she wouldn't let herself be ruled by that. Not anymore. I'm not my mother, Lyra said, her voice clear and strong. I don't want war. I don't want to fight. But if you want to destroy the peace we've worked for, you'll have to go through me. Alex moved beside her, his hand resting on his weapon, his eyes scanning the room. He wasn't speaking, but his presence beside her made her feel stronger. She wasn't alone. She had never been alone, and now, more than ever, she needed to believe that. The rebel leader chuckled, clearly amused by her defiance. You're a fool, princess. This peace won't last. The people will rise against you. You can't control them. You can't control the galaxy. Lyra's gaze hardened. I'm not trying to control anyone. I'm trying to build a future where we don't have to keep fighting. You're the one who can't see that. There was a long pause, and for a moment, the room was silent. The tension thick. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to look away. She wouldn't back down. Not now. Not ever. The rebel leader stepped forward, his hand reaching for a detonator at his side. Lyra's stomach dropped. He was about to blow the station apart, to kill everyone inside just to prove a point. In that instant, Alex moved. He was a blur, too fast for anyone to stop, and within seconds, he had disarmed the rebel leader. The room erupted into chaos as the rebels drew their weapons, but Alex was already moving again, taking them down one by one with the same precision that had made him a legend during the war. Lyra stood frozen, watching as Alex fought. He was no longer just the boy she had once known. He was Spectre, the warrior who had ended the war, the man who now protected her and the future they both dreamed of. With the rebels subdued, the room fell quiet. Lyra's heart raced as Alex approached her, his face hard but with a glimmer of relief in his eyes. You okay? He asked, his voice softer now. Lyra nodded, though her breath still came in shallow bursts. I don't know how you do it, Alex. You make it look so easy. Alex gave a small, tired smile. It's not easy, but it's worth it. As they stood in the control room, Lyra realized that they had won this battle. But the war for peace was far from over. There would be more fights ahead, more struggles to overcome. But for the first time since the war had begun, she didn't feel alone. She had Alex by her side, and together, they could face whatever came next. Let's send the message, Lyra said, stepping forward to the communications console. Let's tell them we're not giving up. Alex stood beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. Together, he said, his voice filled with determination, together, they would rebuild the galaxy. The space station, once a symbol of the fragile peace between two warring factions, had become a battleground again. But this time, something was different. The chaos had subsided, and with it came the realization that the battle was not over. But they had taken a critical step toward ending it for good. Lyra stood by the large observation window, staring out into the vastness of space. The stars seemed so far away, but she couldn't help but feel a sense of determination rise within her. The war was behind them, but the work ahead was only just beginning. Beside her, Alex leaned against the wall, his eyes watching her quietly. After everything they had been through, after the loss, the betrayal, and the battles, they had finally reached a turning point. The war had ended, but now they faced the challenge of rebuilding their fractured worlds. We did it, Lyra said softly, almost to herself. We took the first step, Alex replied. But it's just the beginning. The two of them had worked together to stop the rebel factions that sought to destroy the fragile peace between the Zorth Empire and the human colonies. They had exposed the conspiracies and broken the chains of division. The summit had been secured, the message had been sent, and now the task of bringing both sides together was more important than ever. Lyra glanced over at him. His face, though worn and battle-hardened, still held the same spark of hope that she remembered from their childhood. He wasn't just the warrior who had ended the war. He was the man who had always been by her side, even when she hadn't known it. You're right, she said, straightening her back. We've made the first move, but now we need to lead both sides into this new future. Alex nodded. We've got a long road ahead, but we're not alone in this. There are people out there who want peace. We'll find them, and we'll build something that lasts. Lyra looked down at her hands, fingers trembling slightly. The weight of responsibility was heavier than ever. Her mother's legacy hung over her like a shadow, and she knew that many of her people still saw her as a princess who couldn't bring about true change. But she refused to be defined by her lineage. She had her own path to follow. I still don't know if I'm ready, she admitted quietly. I've spent my whole life learning how to rule, how to fight, but I never learned how to lead in times of peace. You'll learn, Alex said firmly. You're already a leader, Lyra. The way you've brought people together, the way you've fought for what's right, that's what makes you a leader. Her eyes met his, and for the first time since the war had started, she felt a spark of belief. Maybe she wasn't just the princess of a broken empire. Maybe she could be something more. She could be the leader her people needed, not just because of her title, but because of her heart, her strength, and her willingness to fight for what was right. As the days passed, the two of them worked tirelessly to bring both sides to the table. The human colonies had agreed to the peace talks, but many of their leaders were still distrustful of the Zorth. Similarly, the Zorth people were divided. Some wanted to rebuild their empire, to return to their former glory, while others wanted to embrace a new way forward. Lyra and Alex faced each obstacle with determination. They worked late into the night, crafting speeches, meeting with diplomats, and negotiating with military leaders. It wasn't easy, but with every step, they could see the hope in the eyes of those they spoke to. The humans, who had fought so long for their freedom, wanted to believe in peace. The Zorth, scarred by years of war, wanted to rebuild, but many had lost hope that they could ever coexist with their human counterparts. But Lyra refused to give up. She knew that the galaxy needed something more than just an end to the war. It needed a new beginning. Sometimes, I wonder if we'll ever be able to trust each other again, Lyra said one evening, sitting across from Alex in the quiet of their temporary command center. The weight of the task ahead was pressing on her. The years of war have left deep scars. The people are so divided. How do we convince them to believe in this peace? Alex looked at her, his expression thoughtful. You don't convince people by telling them what they want to hear. You show them that peace is possible. It's not easy, and it won't happen overnight. But every step we take, every effort we make, will bring us closer. Lyra nodded slowly, thinking about his words. She had spent so much time looking for the easy answers, but there were none. Peace, like any true change, was something that had to be earned. The next day, they traveled to the capital of the human colonies to meet with the leaders there. It was a tense gathering, with both sides watching carefully for signs of weakness or betrayal. But Lyra was determined to make her case, standing before the human leaders. She spoke with conviction. We have been at war for far too long. Our people have suffered. We have lost so much. But we are not defined by our past. We are defined by what we choose to do next. We can rebuild together. We can forge a future where our children never have to experience the pain we've lived through. But we can only do that if we trust each other, if we are willing to lay down our weapons and look toward a better tomorrow. Her words were simple, but they were filled with truth, and for the first time, the humans, many of whom had been bitter enemies only days ago, nodded in agreement. The next day, they met with the Zorth leaders. There, Lyra spoke again, her voice full of strength. We have been divided by war, But we are not enemies. We are all people of this galaxy, and it is time for us to build something new. A future where we stand together, united by our shared experiences and hopes. The Zorth were more reluctant, but Lyra's words began to resonate with them as well. They had known nothing but war for so long. But now, in this moment, they were starting to see the possibility of something else, something better. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Slowly but surely, the leaders of both the Zorth and human colonies began to meet more regularly. The first tentative steps were taken toward rebuilding the galaxy. During this time, Lyra and Alex spent their days together, leading, guiding, and finding common ground. They attended countless meetings, spoke to ambassadors, and negotiated with military leaders. They were both learning as they went, but they were doing it together, and as the months passed, Lyra found herself growing stronger, more confident. She no longer felt like a child thrust into a position of power. She was a leader, one who had fought for peace and who was willing to do whatever it took to ensure that it lasted. One evening, after a particularly difficult meeting, Lyra and Alex stood outside, looking up at the stars. The night was quiet, and the soft hum of the station was the only sound around them. "It's hard to believe," Lyra said, her voice almost a whisper, "that we've come this far." Alex smiled, his eyes gentle. "It's just the beginning, Lyra, but we've taken the first step, and we've made it together." Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the years behind her, but also the hope of the future ahead. Together, she repeated softly, "And in that moment, with Alex by her side and the future full of possibilities, Lyra knew that no matter the challenges that lay ahead, they could face them. They would rebuild together.